Welcome, everybody. And as you know, this is Art Viewing Adventures. Usually, as we get started, we have a little chat about something. And Charlie, you are not in San Francisco. You're not even in the United States of America.
And I'm wearing a turtleneck.
And you're wearing a
I,
turtleneck.
you
So
practically
tell
need
us.
one here.
Yeah, so I'm in Montreal, Canada.
Yeah, I don't know if it's colder there or here in the Bay Area. You might have heard our fog has really played a big role in the past few days. The Blue Angels did not fly yesterday because of the fog.
Is that right? You're kidding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of worked out for me. But Charlie, you're in Montreal and you were talking about the art museum there. When you go to a new city, I mean, and I know you know Montreal, but when you go to a city that you're not familiar with and you're going to go to the art museum, like, how do you approach it? What do you do?
Oh, I'm always hungry for hitting museums up whenever I'm out of town. And Montreal in general is a great art city. There's a really strong art movement here. They have a great thing called La Nuit Blanche, which in French means you've stayed up all night, is what it basically means. And they close off a major street and open it up to artists who put down these large. I don't know if it's not a canvas. I don't know what it is that they put down, but artists paint directly onto in the street. So you're just walking down the street,
So,
and
so you were there
I
while this
was. It's
event?
not going on now, but I've been there during that, and it's just wonderful. And then the Beaux Arts Museum, which is the Fine Arts Museum, is just great. They've got a terrific collection that's very broad. It goes, they've got stuff from the Middle Ages, and then right on up to great contemporary art as well. Normally, they have a huge Chihuly glass piece that sits in the entrance. It's outside normally, but I think they must take it down in the winter because it probably just gets too cold. Uh,
Cool.
and
Um,
right now they have a Deanne Arbus exhibit, which is fabulous. It's all done successively, starting in the 60s and moving up through the rest of her career. And it's got all the heavy hitters seen by her, but it also has a lot of a lot of pieces which I didn't recognize at all, which were terrific.
cool. Well, let me ask Fred, when you're traveling and you're going to a city other than San Francisco, how do you approach?
Well, I actually hope to see artists I haven't seen before. Invariably, if you go to a major city, there'll be art by people we're familiar with, or maybe even a major show. But I like to see artists who maybe I've never even heard of. If it's a local artist or somebody the museum knows about or has a collection of that I don't know. So I look for that. But I mean, it's
I
good to
agree.
see old friends. I was in Minneapolis a few weeks ago, and the Walker Art Museum had quite an extensive collection. They own quite a few David Hockneys in different media, and that was fun to see because there were some works I had never seen in person or had not seen at all. And it was pretty much. I'm very impressed. I don't know how they acquired all of them, but it had sort of a retrospective feel about it.
Yeah, one of the things I like is to see artists that I am familiar with, but being shown in a different way in different
Uh-huh.
museums. I've had that experience before, where who was that Icelandic artist who had that piece, The Visitors?
Hagnerson, is that his name?
Olafson.
Yeah,
Oleop Hagnar Oleopson, is
yeah,
that what it is?
and we of course loved having that here in San Francisco, but seeing that portrayed, I did decide we probably had the best venue for showing that, but it was interesting to see how it was done in different places. So we are at 1 o'clock. This is Art Viewing Adventures. I'm Rodney Paul, and I'm joined by my friends Fred Silverman and Charlie Goldberg. But first, we want to hear Nikki Trasvina. You're our connector to the Community Living Campaign. Tell us about CLC and what's going on.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Rodney. Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm one of the community connectors, and we're an organization, a nonprofit in San Francisco that is, we cater to the needs of seniors and people with disabilities. Um, we do a lot of tech support. We're trying to close the digital divide. We do training for seniors and disabled people that want to, you know, reach out and be able to use their devices. So we do a lot of that, and we bring other types of programming, creative writing. writing groups, exercise, things like that. So this is one of our most popular programs, art viewing. So we're glad you're here today. I'll put some things in the chat um, in a little bit so you can either contact us or know more about us, and even get our monthly newsletter if that's something that might interest you. Yeah, so thanks, Rodney.
Yeah,
And
it's always great to be here, and we're really grateful to Community Living Campaign for continuing to do this. We've been doing this twice a month since May of 2020, and we got lots more great things planned. But this one today is a program I've been really looking forward to because it's about a San Francisco treasure, Pier 24. I'll go ahead and start my slides. Pier 24. I would love to know, like, out there in the audience, how many of you are familiar? How many of you have been to Pier 24? If you, I'm seeing some hands being raised. But we'll give you a little bit of an overview. The exhibition we're going to talk about is Looking Forward. And I am joined by Fred Silverman and Charlie Goldberg, who are both fellow guides at what I affectionately call the San Francisco Museum, Unnamed Museum of Art, or SF-UMA. But it's a museum you're probably familiar with. It has kind of newer art located near the Montgomery BART station. So that may help you understand who they are. But we've all been guides there, and I know Charlie, you and Fred often did a lot of the photography tours. Fred, you also are a photographer, and we talked about your works in an exhibition just last month. And then Charlie, you are an instructor for Osher Lifelong Learning, and you have a class called Paint It Black. Tell us a little bit about that exhibition or that class, Charlie. What does it cover?
Well, what I'm going to be doing is doing a retrospective of Black artists and Black art, starting with the very, very first works that are known by Black art. And when I say Black artists, it's primarily Black American artists. We will be doing some African artists as well, but just really doing a survey. What were the important topics in the history of Black art? We'll certainly be talking about the Harlem Renaissance, and how Black artists got patronage and were able to continue their art. We're going to talk about the Art Institute of Chicago and how important that was for being one of the few institutions that actually taught Black artists and openly accepted Black artists, and the kind of racism that a lot of Black artists had at other major teaching institutions. And we're just going to look at great art. That's the bottom line. We're going to look at great art and talk about that.
Cool. That sounds like a lot of fun. And you and I are both docents for the Museum of the African Diaspora, also, which is right around the corner from the unnamed Museum of Art that we were talking about. But let's get into Pier 24 and talk first of all where you would find it. It's basically right underneath the Bay Bridge. And we're going to see a photograph that kind of alludes to, it's a photograph taken very close to its location, although it's not of Pier 24. And the thing to know about Pier 24 is you need to have a reservation, and there's limited numbers of reservations. Maybe that's good news if anyone's really worried about COVID risk. You're not going to be in this place with a lot of other people, and it has really good air circulation. It's free. That's kind of cool. And they do require that masks be worn at all times, covering both nose and mouth. But the trick to this place is you have to go on a weekday, and they have 3 different slots. So it isn't something you can do on the weekend. They also have this guide, I've got mine right here, that they will give you for free when you walk in there, and it tells you the names of the artworks and the artists because they do not have wall text. The guy whose collection it is doesn't believe in wall text, and so this is how you find out what you're looking at. So we're going to start. Actually, you know what? I think Fred, is it okay? We'll start with you, Fred, and then we'll
Okay.
see your images, and then we'll switch to ours.
Okay.
So let me stop sharing. Fred, you go ahead and share.
Ready for me to go?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that I like a lot about these kind of large shows that they do at Pier 24 with multiple photographers is that even though when you're in one of the galleries, and all of the galleries for this show have a single artist in them, each one has their sort of own approach to taking pictures, and the styles are very nice to compare and contrast. But for me this time, there was a little bit of a theme emerging among several of the photographers that caught my eye. And I thought we would focus, at least the first part of my presentation today, on those particular images. So I'm not going to say a whole lot about them until we kind of see them collectively. So this is Fred Herzog. He's a German-born photographer, but did most of his photography in Vancouver. And he did a lot of photography around the world. I will say one thing about him that I found very interesting. He loved using the famous Kodachrome film, which has those very, very rich, saturated colors. But he always had a problem, and that's a slide film, by the way. That's not a film that's made for prints. And it wasn't really until digital technology came along that you could make prints that he felt captured the intensity of the colors. So these prints go back, not that long compared to when the photos were taken. Okay, I have to do this. All right, so this is a Mexican photographer, a young woman, Tanya Franco Klein. And again, I'm just sort of let you look at these for a moment until we sort of compare them, the four that I picked out. This is Austin Long. He's actually a young San Franciscan, and he was, I believe, went to San Francisco State, primarily black and white. And this is Ray Metzger, who studied in Chicago. And actually, he was kind of an experimental photographer. He did a lot of overlapping of images and things like that. So let's look at these together. So first of all, what do you think I noticed when I saw these photographs by four different people? What's the thing that they have in common, or that might be interesting to compare and contrast? Anybody have some thoughts on that?
So
Yeah, what? See, Sarah is saying curtains. She's noticing that people are obscured by various by curtains or some sort of like translucent glass.
Yeah.
What about you, Charlie? What are you noticing?
yeah, I was going to say some sort of glass is what we're seeing all of them through, but they're also all obscured images. We don't really have good views of the subjects.
Yeah,
And
usually,
then,
of course, we think about what do photographers take pictures of, not necessarily what are they taking pictures that we don't really see what it is. And so three of these were taken by street photographers, more or less people who wander through an area. We often think of them as flaneurs. They don't have anything in mind in particular, but they go out and see something that captures their imagination. One of them was staged. Anyone have any thoughts about the one that was staged?
I would think it would probably be the hand. You would have to arrange. Well, I guess it could be either one of the lower ones, right? You'd have to arrange for those people to be doing that, wouldn't you?
Okay, so we have a vote for the two lower ones. Any other thoughts on which
well,
one
I
might
actually
have been
think
staged?
I actually think it's the woman behind cookbooks, because if I'm not mistaken, isn't that a self-portrait?
This did not appear as a self-portrait, but let's go back to the staged part of it. So you think that's the one that's staged?
Yes.
And what gives you that feeling?
Well, you'd have to be pretty lucky to catch someone behind a sort of semi-translucent glass at the right time in order to get that.
Mm-hmm. So Charlie does get the had the correct guess. So this is by this woman I mentioned earlier, Tanya Franco Klein. She really explores emotion and a lot of loneliness. Now, when we were in the gallery, and I don't have other pictures of hers to show you, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the photographer Deanne Arbus. Most of her pictures by far were a portraiture of very interesting, often marginalized people. And my comment was, when we went into this gallery, well, she's showing the places where those people live. And if you see these pictures, and I hope you get to go, you'll see they're very atmospheric and very much about the emotions of the people in them. In fact, this is what she had to say. In the end, my main character is always emotion. And emotion is universal, and everyone understands emotions. It doesn't matter where you're from. You know how it feels to be anxious. You know how it feels to be lonely. So would you assign those same feelings to the other photos, or there are some other sort of stories that these photos might tell that's different from the one that was staged? What are the stories that they suggest?
Well, I do want to acknowledge Karen's comment that we're all looking, people on the inside looking out,
No,
we're
outside looking in.
outside looking, we're kind of outside looking at them. And I don't know, the guy behind the blinds, is he alienated or is he like this voyeur? I get the sense of him being a voyeur. And then the two bottom ones, we're just kind of like getting a sneak view of these people, maybe unawares, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction. That guy looking through the blinds, he could be as much a flaneur, so to speak, toward the photographer as the photographer is toward him. Where the others, they don't know what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. I guess we've kind of captured them without they could be completely unaware. Maybe someday they'll go into the Pier 24 and have this shock of recognition.
Yeah, that would be very funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's me.
Yeah. Hey, Fred, do you think you could go back to showing the first one, the red door one by itself? Great. So I have to tell you, I love this particular photograph. And for one of the reasons I love it is I love the very muted palette that Herzog has in this particular photo. I also like the combination of textures that he gets in this photo. But one of the things I love about a great piece of art is I really love being able to create a story about what I'm looking at. I feel like I could write a short story using just this photo. Why is that arm opening up the curtain? Did they hear something outside? Did they want you to look in? And the fact that the curtain along the door is also partially open. I love that, the semi availability of information, if you will. You don't have all the information, you just have a little bit of information. I think you have that sense in these other photographs as well.
Right.
I just love the palette of the first ones.
So I love the idea of the suggested stories, and I think it invites the reader to really read their story into these photos. I think a lot of times you get what there is, obviously you can have a different reaction to it, but these are implied or suggested stories, and I think that really involves the viewer immediately. So I'm going to finish with a quote from Ray Metzger, who did this picture on the upper left. He said, "Excitement is to be found in the suggested," that's what we're talking about, "and what the minimum of articulation can lead us to see. It is one thing to enhance the obvious. It's quite another to catch the elusive. We pluck a few threads from reality, perhaps producing a package of wonder formed of light on silver with poetical and mystical charms." So, Rodney, before I move on, give me a sense of my time, please.
We're about 15 minutes in. We're doing good. We
How
got
much more time do I have?
about 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay,
And
okay.
I just want to comment. Sherry, she had said she loved that same one that you like, Charlie. By the way,
Mm.
Charlie, you're such a sucker for triangles. I just have to note
Yes.
that there's a really distinct triangle in that. And then Sherry says, I see three of them as anxious, but not the one with the newspaper.
Oh,
Right.
that's a very interesting response. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I also want to mention, because Fred is probably too modest to mention this himself, but Fred himself is a photographer who takes photographs. He's done a series looking into homes, into glass, where he has people behind glass. I just want to give you props for that, Fred, because I love the series that you did on San Francisco homes. So I love that you chose this as a theme, because it's your artistic theme as well.
It was over during COVID anyway. All
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
so when,
But actually, before you move on, Fred, there's one other thing that I just want to mention, and I always like to have people point this out when they're looking at photographs, is that these are 35 millimeter film or digital, right? But what I mean by that is that they have either a horizontal or landscape view, or a vertical or portrait view, right? And I think it's really interesting that the bottom two really lend themselves to landscape view. They're lengthwise rather than vertical. And it's really interesting. The top two could have been done in a portrait or vertical view, but they're not. And I'm just wondering if people have any comments about that.
Like you could crop them differently and get a very different sense
Right,
of them.
exactly. It would tell a different story. Either of you have thoughts about that, or anyone in the audience?
Yeah, it's just it's just like the one at the top is kind of like there's almost like two photos that have been combined,
They do. Yep.
and then the one at this, the one, just like that design, and you know, it kind of places her when you do that, I think. Also,
So,
the
Fred,
towel rack is missing its she doesn't have a place to put a towel.
Fred, you're a photographer. Would you have put either of those top ones in a portrait view?
Maybe the one on the left.
Hmm.
Um, I think it would have been very interesting to see the verticality of that image as opposed to the horizontal feel that he has here. I'm not really sure, but I think that one in particular, I'd like to at least see what the choices would be. All right, folks, thank you for that. I'm going to move on. You saw very briefly when Rodney showed you the cover for this exhibit. It's by this very, very interesting creative photographer named of Daniel Gordon. And I'm going to show you a couple of pictures, photos of his before I sort of, lead you to a discussion. So here's another one. And my first question is quite simply, who does he make you think of as an artist?
Hockney.
Hockney, okay. And I don't
thought
have Hockney
immediately
to
of
compare, but
Matisse.
it's a really great comment because I'm watching a documentary about Hockney right now on TV, and several of his paintings in this sort of genre came up in the documentary, and I thought, oh my God, there's this photographer again. Who else?
Matisse, especially the prior one. I absolutely see Matisse in this. His juxtaposition of wild patterns.
So here is first of all, what these look like. They're quite large. I think this is to give you a sense. This is a photo from the gallery at Pier 24. And here's the Matisse.
Ah. We didn't plan this, folks. I promise you, we didn't plan this. That's
So
great.
let's put these next to each other, and someone other than Rodney and Charlie, I would invite you to say what you see they have in common.
And feel free to either unmute, or if you want to throw it in the chat, we'll read your chat, but you're welcome to unmute.
Any thoughts?
Big patterns and fruit.
Okay, subject matter, fruit, very good. Big patterns, use the graphic approach to these.
Judith says that too. Fruit. She sees fruit.
So
Pictures.
the way that
I heard someone say something. Say that again.
Pictures.
pictures, yes, another commonality in terms of the subject matter.
Yeah.
So
Roger says he's noticing just like lots of colors, I think, is
and the
bright
obviously
colors,
very, very bright colors.
various objects, not necessarily connected.
Yeah. So the way that Daniel Gordon takes these photos is that he makes tableau out of both three-dimensional objects and two-dimensional images that he finds on the internet, he buys in various places, and he literally physically creates these scenes and then photographs them. So here's a photograph of him creating these scenes. And then after he takes photograph, he does heavy photo editing with things like Photoshop to exaggerate colors and all of that thing. So what you're really looking at here, and now that I've given away the technique, can you now see this image in some ways three-dimensionally as well as two-dimensionally? And if someone can give a couple of examples of where in particular you see that, now that you see how he does this, the three-dimensional elements, anyone care to point out a spot or two?
The
Like,
thing that stands out the most for us or for me is the edge of the table, which I didn't even notice before
Is
because
that
it was
here?
flat.
Yeah, very.
Yeah.
I hadn't noticed that until I read more about his technique. You can literally almost see this like a covering on a board or a table. Yeah, and here along here as well.
and then Sarah says the support for the yellow water pitcher. So there'll be something underneath the one in the middle, I think. The other one.
Oh yeah, right. The sport right here. Yeah. Whoops. Yeah, right in here. So I think more than anything else, he's a very fun photographer. What I found very interesting, and I do not have an example to show you, as light and playful as these are, some of his early work were kind of like collages of faces that were verged on being a little disturbing. Very, very distorted, very odd combinations of facial features and things. It seems like maybe he's mellowed out as an artist over the years. So anyway, he's been described as a 21st century Matisse, reincarnated as a photographer. That's what one of the critics described him as. And another comment I thought that was great was that this work makes Matisse look like a minimalist. I thought that was a great line.
Yeah.
Do I have time for one more?
Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
Any
I
other
could
thoughts?
comment that- I was just going to make one comment.
Yeah,
which is-
please.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Go
Go ahead,
ahead.
Charlie.
Yeah. So I just want to make one more comment, which is that there's a current artist who also was very influenced by Matisse. Her name is Micheline Thomas. I wrote the name in the chat there if anyone's interested. She's a painter. And if you look at a lot of her work, she does a lot of the things where, like I always make the comment when I'm talking about Micheline Thomas, like she puts these patterns next to each other that would just horrify my mother. My mother would say, "Oh, how could you, have stripes and paisley next to each other?" She would be horrified that. But Matisse loved to do that. Micheline Thomas loves to do that in her artwork, and it's fun to look at her paintings. And of course, this photographer is just having a field day with that.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going back to Fred Herzog. And I told you he was a street photographer, walked around, just took pictures that he, sort of caught his eye. And he did these two pictures of this barber shop. And he took one from the inside looking out, and one, the same barbershop outside looking in. And whoops, I thought I had them side by side, but I don't. So my question would be to you is, what do we see differently about this barbershop when we look in versus looking out? How does the story change?
To me, it looks a little seedier from the outside. You can see the paint's peeling.
Uh-huh.
You get a sense of like this place has been here for a long time. I guess from the inside, I find it more. It's obvious. It still gives you a sense of it having been there for a while, but maybe it's a little more inviting, cozy.
So do you think these need to be seen together to get a sense of what he was doing here or seeing here, or do you think these stand by themselves pretty well?
I kind of love the first one. I love that we're looking at somebody through the glass. They're kind of perfectly framed, and I think it stands on its own. It's kind of gives you a sense of a place and some small town, I guess. So I just feel like that could be fine on its own. What do you think, Charlie?
Well, as you'll see in a moment, I really love photographs that are in series, but I would also agree that both of these stand alone. And of course, the photographer that both of these shots really remind me of is Walker Evans. And Fred, you and I have both led tours of the exhibit of Walker Evans that was in town, I want to say.
So for those of you who may not be as familiar with Walker Evans, a couple of things that to reflect what Charlie said. He loved having words in his photos. He loved the words being something that you go to because that's easy to read. Might be easier to read than the photo itself. And the other thing is he loved storefronts. He loved the kind of the word he would use is the vernacular, say, of style here or architecture. This was certainly not a fancy place, but it spoke to ordinary people kind of leading their ordinary lives. And he was fascinated with that. He was kind of like I would say, both an observer and a chronicler of America. And a lot of it rural America, but to a certain extent urban. But that was kind of his approach, or one of them.
And there's a couple of comments too. Sherry says, I love the old cash register that's in there, which is great. And then Ronald says, inside left side is mostly monochrome, right has color, but background has muted colors. If you could go to the next one for a second, Fred, as Rodney pointed out, I love triangles. Okay, I love triangles as they appear in works of art. And here, there's just a multiplicity of triangles that you can figure out. Whether if you're looking at the farthest left of the photo, you have that almost V shape of the white stripes. You have a triangular shape of the awning coming down. But I also love stripes. So this photograph has, like, all the things that I love, triangles and stripes, because I love all the different kinds of stripes and how the verticals, the horizontals, the diagonals all play within each other of this particular photograph. And the palette is really interesting. And again, you've got this really chipped away pink. I don't know what you call that part of the storefront. The lower part. I know there's a word for. I have no idea what the word is. But how that compares to the more pristine pink that you have, because it's been protected a little bit. And then you have the lighter blue that follows it. I love these photographs.
I think the palette. I agree. The palette of this image is absolutely amazing. And this is probably another example of shot with Kodachrome slide film, but printed digitally, so we're able to get that color.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to pass it on. Thank you all very much. Thanks again, Rodney, for having us.
Yeah, that's great, great, Fred. Thank you. And you've given us more stuff to think about when we go to Pier 24. I hope everyone's going to get a chance to do that. The three of us got to go together, which was really nice. But I'm encouraging folks. I kind of need to go back again. It's not the sort of thing you don't want to see just once. So here is, this is a work by Daniel Poster called the Boomtown series, and we'll recognize this. This seems like a place I know. Where could this possibly be? And so we I think it will not be hard to guess what city we're looking at, but where, like Charlie, you loved this image. Tell us more about like what drew you to it, the things that you kind of jumped out at you.
Well, I think one thing that's hard to appreciate when you're looking at it on a computer screen is the size of this image. It's huge. I would say, what would you guys guess? Like 5 feet across, 6 feet across?
Yeah, bigger than almost as big as a person.
Bigger than a bread box. Yeah, it's really, really big. And so you're really a little gobsmacked by it. And there's a couple of things that I love about this particular photograph. And I really wanted to speak about this one because as an image, you can see where it's really bisected in half, north and south. It's really got this really strong horizontal line. So you're going east-west with that line, Rodney. I want that
horizontal. You want that?
Yeah, I want that horizontal, that really strong horizontal. And so what I love is that it really gives you two different perspectives of the city. So what we're seeing in the foreground is we're seeing this old building, the San Francisco University Club. Maybe someone in the audience knows when that was built. If I had to guess, I would say it's turn of the 20th century, but I'm not sure. And so, you have these really beautiful arched windows, that brick that's so nice and dark and red, right? So you have the older vision of San Francisco, and then behind it, you have these very, very large skyscrapers, right? That's the Bank of America building, if I'm not mistaken. You see the new Salesforce building to the right, which ironically looks smaller than the Bank of America building in this particular view. You have the Transamerica Pyramid. So, to me, there's this immediate, so you have this shot that's cut in half. Then you have the foreground that's old, the background that's new, right? And then against that beautiful blue sky. So it really gives you these two old and new senses of San Francisco, right? And then he gives us this little, just absolute delightful image in the center, right? And we have a close-up of that. So here's, we have a view into what's going on into this person's personal space. And it's almost like he's showing us like a little play within a play, if you will. I love being able to tell a story when I look at a work of art. And, I could almost imagine what this person is doing and describing what she's saying or how she's acting within the context of this much larger picture. So go back to the first image, Rodney. So again, look at the, here we're seeing the macro picture of it. And then he focuses us down, he makes us cone down into this micro view. So yes, we're in a big city, but we are all in our little cells, in our little apartments, in our little rooms, having our full life within the context of this larger view. And then if you look at the very bottom of it, you get that little escutcheon, I guess you would call that, that part there of that building, which I love this photograph. I think there's, and when you look at it up close, you can see so many more details, and you really do get enveloped by the size of the photograph. So I think it's terrific. It's a terrific shot. It's one of my favorite pictures. I think it's a picture that you could easily just sort of walk by and go, oh yeah, whatever. It's a landscape. It's a cityscape. It's interestingly enough, whatever. But then you pay close attention and it really pays dividends for you.
Plus, there's a triangle.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure.
So Charlie, do you think that picture would have failed if that woman were not in the window?
No, I think that's a bonus,
Mm-hmm.
that woman in the window. To me, it goes from really an interesting photograph to a really fantastic photograph because of that woman in the window. So not a failure, no, but it's just that gives it so much more. It gives it a whole different dimensionality to it. Because the first part of it is very impersonal. This is extraordinarily personal. We're almost being voyeuristic into what this person is doing or saying in this room.
Do you think it's staged? Do you think he arranged for that?
Ooh, boy, that's a really interesting question. I don't know the answer.
It's just so perfect. It's so perfect that, first of all, you can tell it's a woman. You can tell that she's gesturing with her arm on her side. She's saying something important to somebody, right?
Right.
And you're right. This is like one that really implies you could really tell a story from this
Yeah.
picture, right? This could be the start of a film.
Yeah.
Film noir set
Yeah,
in San Francisco.
Yeah.
This is Rear Window Part 2. She gets murdered in the next scene, and we have to figure out where her body is. Ronald says the blinds make the woman look blocky, like she's made of Legos. Yeah, I like that. That's a great comment.
Yep. If it wasn't staged, boy, it must have been such a delight for the photographer.
Oh,
Oh my God, yeah.
Even if it was, he still nailed it. And then the fact that it's, she's a silhouette with that wonderful light coming through.
Yeah.
So that alone, it means you really need to get yourself to Pier 24. The good news is this show's going to be there for a while.
Yeah.
So this is another one. This is our city. I put the name of it, but if you had to guess where this was, you would be, you might be able to figure out it's San Francisco. And then again, Charlie, this is one you really loved. What drew you to this photograph?
Well, what's really interesting is that I saw this photograph from across the room. And if you can kind of fuzz up your eyes, you're not really sure what you're looking at. It almost looks like someone who's, you know how sometimes you have your house deloused or debugged and they put this kind of kind of canvas or plastic over it, you know. So that's what I thought I was looking at when I got, from a distance. And as I got closer, I realized that it's actually very sharp, and the image is actually very clear what you're looking at. What you're seeing is sort of all these different variations of, the plaster that's against this wall. And it just reminds me about this quote that Da Vinci used to say, is that, I'm paraphrasing here, but what he used to say is that you can just look at a wall for long enough and you're going to start to see images that aren't really there. You can see people, you can see animals, you can see whole scenes, and when you really stare at this wall, you can really start to imagine that you're looking at a lot of different things. Right in the center, you've got your pointer there, a little above and to the left. Yeah, so you can see that there's like a little poster of something. I can't remember what it says. Rodney, do either of you, Fred, do you remember what it says?
I can't remember.
But it's some sort of very innocuous poster that's up on there. But you can start to see all these waves and movements, and you have these strong verticals of that, both the post and the shadow of the post. So I thought it was kind of an interesting photograph. And again, think of the fact that he put that post very far to the left of the photograph, right? He wants us to see the wall, but he doesn't want the wall. He wants us to have context to the wall. So he includes that post. It gives us a visual stepping stone, if you will, as to what we're looking at. So I found it an interesting photograph.
Yep. In I'm looking for your triangles, Charlie. I'm not seeing necessarily triangles, but I'm seeing parallelograms.
Yes.
There's some pretty cool, like the angle of the light, I think, is something really extraordinary in this.
Yeah.
What time of day do you think it is?
Mm.
And then there's a seediness to this that's kind of wonderful. The paint splotches. This probably be something to cover up graffiti, would be my
Yeah.
guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then some kind of like work seemed to be done there. Like this wall, this is a place that's seen a lot of action. It's like we don't see any people here, but we see things that kind of imply human lives passing
Yeah, that's a
through.
great comment. Yeah.
Other thoughts on this? This is one of those questions we love to ask at the museum. Would the word beautiful describe this photograph?
So Ronald says without the post and poster, it would be pure abstract. It would be pure abstract picture. With them, it shows you can find abstract patterns in real life. Great comment. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's almost it is like almost a very modern image with those blocks and everything. Kind of a weird silhouette on powerful drugs or something.
Yeah. And Sherry says, interesting, but not beautiful.
Not beautiful.
Yeah, I'm not sure you would necessarily look at this and say, "Wow, that's a beautiful photograph." It's interesting, though. It's again one of those photographs that pays dividends when you pay attention to it, and when you're up close to it, you can really see detail a little bit better.
Well, that's a good lead into the next photograph because you can ask, like this. Well, actually, I'm thinking of a different one, but this one also, right? Um, it's a portrayal of San Francisco. It happens to be very, very close to where Pier 24 is, and I think they do delight in doing that at the art gallery, showing things that are nearby. And like, let me ask, like, for the audience, what do you notice about this picture of San Francisco? What is it showing us? How is it portraying our city? Feel free to unmute or throw your.
Well, one thing strikes me is it literally puts the underbelly in the foreground, and the modern, the new, the growth, the future, the money in the background, literally.
So Fred, do you think there's a comment being made in the way he's depicting that? Do you think does this photograph have a point of view, do you think?
Well, I don't think it's one that's unknown to anybody in San Francisco, which is with all of our money and our tech and our building and development, we have a side of the city that's pretty dismal and dispiriting.
And so nearby, right?
Yeah.
I
Someone,
see.
Roger just wrote the ugly underpinnings. That's exactly right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Nikki.
Sherry wrote
Again,
contrast of poverty, wealth. Nikki says the vanishing middle class. Well, it's interesting because in his comments, if you go to his website, he says something. He talks about he really likes to photograph his terms, the theater of the city, where you're seeing both the, sort of the beautiful or the magnificent next to the kind of mundane and the difficult, so he really likes to capture those contrasts in his photograph. And I think this is a good example of that.
yeah, like we've got the buildings going up and we've got the people kind of going down.
Well, and I think, obviously this theme has been reflected in a gazillion photos, but I like the fact that there's that wall because it is this sort of visual barrier between the reality of these people in the foreground and the reality of life in the city on the other side of that wall. I think without the wall, it would have been I don't want to say ordinary photo, but it wouldn't have been as sort of powerful as this.
And how many of us, I know I've walked by this location many times and didn't see a great photograph in it. So it's just like, wow, what a way to take lemons and make lemonade, you know?
Yeah, I would go back to Sherry's earlier comment. Not beautiful, but interesting. I'm not sure that this is a great aesthetic work. I think there's more story to be told than aesthetics.
Yeah, and Raina
Raina
says
says,
you have to pay to leave your car there, but you are free to sleep on the street. Ironic. Yep, there's a lot of irony in this photograph, but also a lot of we know this city. This is the city we're kind of grappling with today, right?
and Ronald says, unfriendly fence symbolize class barriers.
Yep. Yeah, I mean we like all those buildings. If the living spaces in those buildings are
Well, look at the different kinds of barriers. You've got the main fence along the way. You've got something off to the right, which is like chain link. The wall behind the fence. Is that the under of the bridge?
yep.
So bridges, very, very often in city divide neighborhoods, or they've destroyed neighborhoods to create divisions, and so that's an implied story there as well.
And
Yep.
people who don't know San Francisco might think there's water right at that part, under that part of the bridge, not knowing that there's
Uh-huh.
really street
Yeah.
traffic there. So it shows like the barrier. I love the white fence because it really highlights this man by himself. And then, like you said, it shows all these multiple barriers. This is a great picture. And it also shows, how San Francisco's skyline has changed. All I recognize of those buildings is the Salesforce and one of those apartment buildings. I can't name those other buildings.
I
Can you
think the
guys?
Millennium Tower is in there. Like that's probably the
Yeah.
Millennium Tower. You can
Millennium
see it
Tower.
leaning a little bit, right?
Yeah, and Salesforce, but what are the other ones? We don't even know them. They're so new.
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah,
like,
these are residential condos down there by the water.
oh,
So there's a comment from, I don't know if it's Peter or Kevin or both. I'm seeing lots of textures in the horizontal wall and the verticalness. And then Judith says, agree with all the comments, but shows lots of textures, which is really true. And then Sherry says there's subtlety in the picture because the poverty is not shown as dirty, it is clean.
That's
May
a
I
good
say
comment.
something? We're assuming that, I guess, both of these figures may be hard pressed to live in San Francisco. But the guy with the hoodie, when I first saw that, I thought, oh, what is that? One of those tech workers who walk around in hoodies and make high six-figure salaries.
Little imposter, right?
Yes, because the way they dress.
And so, so intriguing a picture. And then, like I said, just right around the corner from the gallery. And then here's another one that, you could use that is would the word beautiful describe this? It's, uh, and then the question, of course, you see this stuff. It's pretty. It's like kind of street detritus. But the dots, what's going on with the dots? Anybody else grabbed by this? Are people attracted to or repelled by this? And what, if you do like it, what do you like about it?
It's a more comical take on graffiti.
Comical take on
I
graffiti.
mean,
Yep.
it's like it has a disease or something.
Yes. It's got a graffiti pox or something.
Yeah, Ronald put it as monkeypox.
Monkey pox. Yes. Yes.
Well, I mean, just from a graphic standpoint, I really like the fact that the dots pick up on the the tire wheel hub pattern. It's
Oh,
the
okay.
they're the same size almost on both wheels, visible.
So maybe it's some kind of graffiti artist with a sense of humor.
I don't know. It's just struck me as just a repetition of that same look.
Sherry says or wait, someone's art or destruction, the dots.
Yeah, and it's like another one of these photographs imply stories, but they don't tell us the story. We tell ourselves the story. You look at that's kind of what draws me in is just being intrigued. Like, well, what happened? What happened before this? How did it get that way?
Mhm.
The colors are also great in this, like the way he gets that, the way that orange just kind of pops out of the photograph with the dark background. So would you want this in your living room? Charlie, would you want this in your living room?
The machinery or the photograph?
The photograph. That's what you.
No, it's a hard pass for me.
Hard pass. Fred?
No way.
I might, but I might get some resistance from my roommate.
And Sherry says the dirty, unless it's also paint, porta potty door.
Yep.
Sarah says, and the man looking down, trying to make sense of it all.
Right. That's it.
I don't know. He looks like he's peeing to me.
Oh no.
But he has a porta potty there.
Let's hope not. Yeah.
Someone's in it already.
Okay, so I believe we're going to move on now to a completely different artist. Say the name, Charlie.
Mahaly. So
Zanel
this is an
Mahoney.
artist that uses they pronouns and generally goes by Mahaly. Doesn't use the first name anymore. Zanel Mahaly. Mahaly is from South Africa originally, and I've known Mahaly's work before, and I always find the work so powerful. What's in Pier 24 right now is a series of self-portraits, and Mahaly often uses titles that include tribes in South Africa. And Mahaly is a very politically active person. They're in the LGBTQI community, and they take pictures of lesbian trauma, for example, a lot of violence against the lesbian communities, and really tries to bring that to the forefront in their work. I find it astonishing work from an aesthetic point of view. There's often different hairstyles, often very close in your face photographs. These, I don't know if you can tell, these are very cropped closely. You don't have a lot of background here, but they use different hairstyles and different images. You often see the eyes, which have these little dark pigmentations in the whites of the eyes that make them so gripping. I want to look at these photographs forever. I love the patterns in this particular one. Look at the pattern of the cloth and how they put that around their face to contrast the pattern of the cloth with the highly contrasted colors within the face. The whites of the eyes are very white. The skin is very black. It's really compositionally beautiful work. And I always know when I'm looking at a Mahaly portrait. And just interesting work from a political point of view. Mahaly had an exhibit in South Africa, and the I don't know what you call it, Minister of the Arts, I think, just walked out of the exhibit completely disgusted, saying, "This is this is an insult to the country. This is the degradation of the future." And they use photos often of lots of lesbian women who are, they always make sure that they're of age, right? That they're not photos of minors, and that they are out. Because although homosexuality is legal in South Africa, there's still a lot of violence towards the lesbian community. And so Mahaly is trying to bring out some of these issues in her work. Sherry says there is such deep feeling in this beautiful face. I would like this in my living room, and even more, I would like to follow this person. Well, you should follow this person because they're great photographs. Do we have another example of one?
We do.
Okay, yeah, so here's another. Also, Ronald says, looks familiar, artist featured in an earlier program.
I believe that's true. I think they were also in the last show that they did. And have they been featured also at either MOAD or SF MoMA?
I know that the De Young has a Mahaly photograph, at least one. I don't know how many, but I've seen Mahaly's work in the De Young. But these are just fantastic photographs. And again, you get a lot back if you're there up close and personal. If you're looking, you look at the details, especially the eyes are just fascinating. So I'm always excited by Mahaly's work. I think they're great photographs. I think they're great portraits. I think the cropping is always really interesting.
And the skin tones, right? Like we've often heard in the past that film did not do a good job of picking up black skin pigments, but they are able to really get amazing tones, colors, textures.
Yeah, I want to just pay attention to just one portion of this photograph. I want you to look at the lower portion, look at the right shoulder. Look at there's a term in art called chiaroscuro, which is sort of the contrast between light and dark. And I want you to look at the contrast of the white of the very tip of the shoulder. And then you go back just an inch or two and it's so dark. And then look at the neckline. It almost looks metallic, the way they've portrayed that shoulder. I think that's just brilliant lighting. Look at all the different shadings of both body and face. Contrast that with the texture of the hair. Now, my guess is that's not real hair. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they use lots of different hairstyles, and I know nothing about hair, so I don't know what you can and can't do with it. But just the different texture, and then look at the background in contrast and the kind
doesn't it remind you of Cindy Sherman doing self-portraiture, but in very, very different.
Absolutely, I thought of her immediately when I saw those photos. Yeah, different.
Talk more about that, Fred.
Huh?
Talk more about that.
Well, for people who are familiar with Cindy Sherman, she's built a career on photographing herself as other people in extremely different, generations, economic class, of course, clothing, hair, makeup. And they are mostly, I would say, very playful. I wouldn't put these photos in that category, but they still have that sense of, I am free to present myself in any way I choose to.
Yeah. Sherry says the lighting and skin tones are outstanding, and I would agree. A question that I often ask people when looking at portraits is, do you want to go have coffee with this person? So I'll throw that out to you. Do you want to have coffee? Do you want to have a drink with this person? What do you
Yeah,
think?
maybe. Well, that would be what beverage would you want to have with this person, right? I think I'm going for Negroni or something with some alcohol in it.
So Judith says yes.
Judith wants coffee.
She just says yes. That's all. That just a simple yes.
So
No, I think it's always an interesting question. It's kind of like my story question. Is there a story in these eyes? Is this someone that you find it would be fulfilling to have a conversation with? So for me, it's a hard yes. I would love to meet Mahali and talk to this person.
we've got a couple more images to show. We're getting kind of down to the hour, so let's move on. This was one that we all loved this photograph, and this is Austin Leong, which I think we saw some of his work earlier from Fred. So we talk about photographs that imply a story. What would the story here be? It's probably not a very happy one, right? Or is it? Is it a comic? Is it a tragedy or a comedy that we're looking at? Let me ask you that.
Guess it depends on which side of the fence you're sitting.
Tragedy. Oh,
It's tragedy, Karen.
yeah, it's a tragedy.
I kind
How
of
can you not make it a tragedy with somebody spread out like that on the sidewalk?
the thing that gets me, and Sarah, my wife, pointed this out just before the start of the show, that one of the things that really makes this photograph great is the fact that the light is out on the other letter G.
Agreed.
So the light's out, and the light's kind of out for this person too, right? Like, this is the end of some sort of a wild and crazy evening. None of us would want to be this person, but maybe there's a really, really fascinating and hilarious story that precedes
Well,
it.
I also love the juxtaposition of that person on the sidewalk with the words, "You're in front of the original nugget." Like, you might be passed out, but you're in front of the original nugget.
Yeah, lucky you.
I'm scared of the Nugget Diner signs.
Yeah, the Nugget Diner. Maybe that's what happened. The
Yeah.
guy, that pancake and egg, it may be a really good deal, but you may be sorry a short time afterwards.
Raina, I hope I'm saying this name, but Raina or Raina says, I like the symmetry of this composition.
Tell us a little more about that, Raina. You like is it the horizontal symmetry or the vertical? Like, tell us more.
There's a balance to the composition with this person in the middle. I'm not making a judgment of happy or sad. I mean, it's kind of bizarre. And the G out, the way the letters are, the center of it, the what do you call that? Billboard in the middle, right in the middle. That's a triangle, and the rectangles and the booths. It just seems very balanced. And then this thing bursting out over the nugget. I don't know what that is, but it draws your eye up there. But there's lines shooting down. So it just
There's a
looks like
lot.
it's very balanced.
So there's a lot going on, but it's kind of balanced. I
Mhm.
love the fact that this figure is kind of walking through this whole scene, like he's, and you can see the movement. You can see the blur of his leg.
So, Charlie, I'm going to make a provocative comment. I think this is the flip side of the first image you showed by Poster with the women in the window. This is the upside down version.
Yeah,
Similar symmetry, a little bit of layering.
yeah.
Yeah,
And there it is. Yeah.
There you go.
So she's on the phone with him, and he's like on a bender in Reno, and it's not going to end well.
Yeah.
So one more picture to show you, and I gave this one a little thought, because we are an organization that serves people with disabilities, and this is a portrayal of somebody with a disability. And my question would be, is this like how is this person being portrayed? Are they being portrayed in a respectful way? Do we like this portrayal? What kind of choices has the photographer made? It's the same photographer, Austin Leong, that we just saw. This one's in San Francisco. So curious to hear thoughts on this photograph.
I
Well,
guess
my
my
quick
question did he ask the person sitting on the bench if he could take his photo?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Was permission given to take this photograph? Is this because that would be an important part of it being
Well, that's,
respectful.
yeah, respect.
Other thoughts?
Well, I think an interesting response to that question is you don't see the person's head.
Yeah, and why don't we see their head or their face?
Did
One thing
did
that
he,
makes me think, go
it
ahead,
an-
Peter and Kevin.
did he crop it out to keep the person anonymous?
So yeah,
He just took a photo. The guy may have responded, and he figured, well, maybe I need to cut his head off and just focus on the legs. I don't know.
it makes me think about how we often, those of us who are able-bodied, look away when we see people with disabilities. And this is a reminder that they're just people like us going about their lives. I think about the story behind this. The person sitting at a bus stop, he's taken off his prosthetic leg, maybe because he's a lot more comfortable right now. It's hard to walk around with that leg, and he wants a break from that. And so he's done that. And he's taking public transportation, which we all know is very important to people with disabilities. Serves a lot of their needs. And, just kind of draws you into a life that maybe sometimes some of us look away from. Someone living in our city. Other thoughts? Other thoughts on that?
I was thinking this picture is like from years and years ago. Something about it looks old and kind of dreary, maybe because it's in black and white, and but it says 2016. So is that when the picture was?
Yeah, I think that's when the picture was taken. He Long puts dates on all of his photographs, and it's kind of important because they are kind of capturing a moment in time in our city. And it's kind of a good reminder of like who makes up our city of San Francisco.
Mhm.
And we know he's a photographer who wants us to think about all the people, who on the margins.
Raina says there's something endearing about the prosthetic leg resting alongside this man. Yeah, I just want to make the comment that, again, we've talked about Deanna Arbus a couple of times today. This could absolutely be a Deanna Arbus photo,
Yep.
except if it were her photo, we would absolutely see the head
Mhm.
person's face.
Yeah. So we are kind of at our time, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. I really want to thank Charlie and Fred. You guys have been on this program before. It's always great to do these things with you. Always fun to visit Pier 24 with you, and I hope we do some more of that. Would like to just highly recommend that folks go to pier24.org, get yourself a reservation. Sometimes like the week ahead they are booked up, but it's usually not hard. And as I said, it's free. The main thing you have to do is make sure you don't have to be at work because it is weekdays. So Charlie, Fred, thank you